Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome back to the Wood by Wright shop. Today we're going to be talking about scarf joints, all different kinds of ways of making boards grow longer. Yes, we're going to make longer boards. Get your board stretchers out, let's have a little bit of fun. Now if you are new to Wood by Wright, which I know quite a few people are recently, we do a live on here every Tuesday. Soon here, we're probably going to be moving these over to Wood by Wright 2 because all of the talking videos are going over to Wood by Wright 2 and the artistic showing videos are staying here in Wood by Wright 1. So if you want to see that, go over to Wood by Wright 2. There's a link to it down below. And also, if you are new here and you have any questions, comments, or ideas, put those in the chat and my wife will collate them. Say hi, Sarah.
Hi, I just got to Alan's not so funny joke.
Which one? He's been telling a few of them.
Oh, how long does it take a gnome to get ready? I don't know, but we will when Sarah logs in. Those lullabies can only be sung so fast.
Yes, if you make any derogatory terms, you owe Sarah chocolate money. So.
I've got my own personal hot cocoa fund.
Yeah, so if you are watching this live, go ahead and join us in the live chat. It is a lot of fun to hang out in there. As well as if you are not watching this live, then look down in the description below and I will have a list of all of the questions and a timestamp that will get you roughly close to it. So you can look through those a little bit quicker. I just got an invite in the email for Ottawa, Illinois. There will be a MWTCA meet there on the 8th of September, I believe it was. So if you are a member of MWTCA, Midwest Tool Collectors Association, there is a... What's that?
You're not giving me sound again.
I'll check it in just a moment. So yes, if you are going to be going to the Ottawa meet, looking forward to seeing you there. And so if you imagine like half a basketball court completely covered in hand tools all for sale, that is what it is. If you want to know what that is, go to mwtca.org and join up and you can come to the meets. Let me take a look at yours.
So we have priorities. You're too loud, I'm not loud enough. People have spoken who they want to hear.
Well, okay, that's because you're on these ones. Let's do this. There, try that now.
Can you hear me now?
That's probably better because I had the overhead mic on.
Sometimes live chat is more entertaining than what James is doing. Always. Hello.
Yes, usually.
But you're too loud still, apparently.
Am I too loud still?
Yeah. They don't want to hear you.
Let me check that. This one should be the same.
I don't know.
Because I just had the overhead mic on earlier, so I had to turn that off. And let's go into you.
See, he talks about me taking too long to get ready, and he still doesn't have it all put together correctly.
We're good on there.
No. Do you have your mic higher than usual?
No.
No.
It may have just been because there's a minute and a half delay, so they may not have answered yet.
We'll say.
So yeah, if you're going to be in Ottawa, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Alan, thank you. I think you get a dad joke now. So, Alan, let's see what your dad joke is from the book.
You say, ooh, it's all for me. It's not for you.
Good point. Let's see. Why was the mouse scared of becoming a doctor?
Why?
He knew he'd have to take the MCAT.
Oh, you're apparently less staticky.
I'm what?
It says they say you're less static. James' audio is blowing out. I don't know. Maybe Digimer, try reloading.
Let me just check something else out then. If it's still going loud, you're off. You just turn this down a little bit. See if that's any better. Let me know how that sounds. But yeah, I don't know what else has changed. There's probably something in there. It's always fun when you have like 15,000 inputs and 4 cameras. But today we are working on scarf joints. And it may have been that if you turned it up due to listening. Well, I don't know, but yeah.
Nothing.
Most people, when they think about scarf joints, they think about the zigzaggy sawtooth scarf joints you get from the store. Anytime you're working with long pieces of trim, they'll often be joined together with this zigzaggy pattern. And those are great for machines because they're very easy to run a router and clean them out. But for hand tools, they're a pain, and they really don't provide that much more strength than doing it a couple other ways. So I want to look at a couple other ways.
They're saying you're fine. Just keep going.
Cool. So let's actually take a look at some of these joints here. Oh my, focus. There we go. 2. And on these ones, as soon as the camera actually catches up.
Those are new lines.
Hello.
It's called a lance.
Oh, why am I having issues now? Let's try media, the media, and 2. Oh, life is fun.
Yes, no.
Let me try one more thing. This is working just a minute and a half ago, just before Sarah came down. Since Sarah came down, everything goes wrong when Sarah comes down. Okay, let's try that. And 2. No. Okay.
Nope.
Well, we're going to have to play with this camera, which means I'm just going to move around the main camera, so that we're going to make things a little bit more interesting, especially as that is up on the rig right now. Ah! Okay, just a minute. I'm going to have to disconnect things. Things are going to go dark. Oh, no!
Okay, we'll just talk about you behind your back.
Yeah, people like talking about me behind my back. There we go. Now I can just move this camera over here, and we can work with this one camera.
Hey, be nice.
All right, so here's what we got.
You can't see anyone chatting.
What's that?
Nothing. I'm talking to them.
So the most common way to do a scarf joint is to split with a long angle like this. And the reason you do this is that this gives you a greater amount of long grain to long grain. So basically, if you are gluing something, if you go long grain to long grain like that, you get a really good glue connection. If you go end grain to end grain like that, you have a very, very poor glue connection. Even if you go long grain to cross long grain, you're still going to have a very strong glue connection that way. Anytime you're gluing with end grain, you're running into problems. The glue just does not hold as well. Now, it still holds significantly well with most PVAs, but for general joinery work, it's not good to glue end grain to anything. When you cut a long, thin taper on this, basically what you're doing is you're exposing more long grain. So if I were to cut this at 45 degrees, then it would be half long grain and half end grain. And so the longer you can make this taper, the more end grain you're showing up on here. And then if you create 2 of them, you can glue them together, and you can get a really, a surprisingly strong joint. And this is something that looks weak, but a lot of boats are actually put together with this. The decking that goes on the outside of the ship, if the boards aren't long enough, they will scarf them together and glue them just like this. And you'll have this on the outside of a boat. So if you think about the strength required for that, it's very common. If you want to see more on that, go to, what's the name of that channel just had? Acorn to Arabella. Yeah, that's the one. And he just did one on the main board, the first plank that goes together, and they have a scarf joint just like this, just with much bigger boards. And so it's a very good joint. And so I'm going to explain a couple of these different ways of doing it, and then see what you guys want to do. Another way that I've seen quite a few people do it is actually with a dovetail key like this. And it's kind of hard to see because the grain runs through. And it is just 2 dovetails. And this one's going to be pretty hard to wiggle apart because I got this one in there really nice and tight. Let me see if I can wiggle it out. Wow, that is nice and tight. Okay, I'm going to have to work on that one. And this is really nice because it creates more of that long grain to long grain. It also has a mechanical strength. As you can see, this is an incredibly strong joint, even without glue. There we go. Hey. So even without glue, you can get a really nice strong joint. The nice thing about this is you have this long grain to long grain. Now there are a lot longer tails than you're normally used to because you're normally used to just seeing tails going through the thickness of a board, so they only need to be as long as the board. Well, the longer you can make these tails, the more long grain to long grain glue you're actually connecting. And so this is a good way of doing it. The only downside to it is you see this sawtooth pattern on the face. So if you're just going to be seeing the edge of the board, then this makes it disappear and you just get that cut line. And like on this, if you're just going to be seeing the face of the board, joining them together like this, you just get this one line. It makes them disappear much easier. But some people do like seeing the dovetailed finger design, so that's kind of a fun one. And then when you actually get into square stock or you get into framing joinery, then you've got a whole pile of different things. And you start looking at Japanese joinery. There are hundreds of different ways of scarfing these together. One particular one that I showed recently on a live video was doing the impossible sliding dovetail. And so this one it has a dovetail on all four sides, which makes it feel like it's impossible to come together. But if you look at the end here, all it is a sliding dovetail set on 45. And then you can have the opposite end here, and they can just fit together. So that's a fun way of doing them. But there are a lot of other ways of doing this, and if you start looking up Japanese joinery, you will come across literally hundreds of different styles of connecting a board together. But this is one of my favorite because it just looks really kind of sharp. Another way is actually to create a long tenon and a mortise inside the board. So you would have a square peg basically of this running up into this joint, and that gives you a lot of long grain to long grain connection. But that's the big thing you're looking for, is that long grain to long grain connection. So I thought I would ask you guys, I have time to show off one or two of these methods, and I was wanting to know which ones do you guys want to see? Do you want to see the long taper? Do you want to see the dovetails? Or what would you want me to try out? So go ahead and put those in the chat and we'll see. And while we're waiting for that, are there any particular questions right now?
I don't think so.
Really? How is the chat? Is it active tonight?
'Tis lively.
Yeah, no, this particular joint, doing a tapered scarf joint, is one that I honestly have never had a particular use for, because most of the things that I make, if I need a board to be X long, I buy a board that's X long. Where this is really common is in like shipworking, where you have 20, 30 foot long ships, or you have siding on other, what's the word for? Lap siding. They would sometimes do this, because if you just butt boards together, well, then that's a spot where water can work in between them. Whereas if you splice them side by side, then there's less chance that the water is going to leak inside of one and into the house. But that is really old technology, because that's a lot of work for siding. So yeah, what are they saying?
Okay, so I have dovetailed, long dovetails, dovetails, impossible dovetail, dovetails, impossible dovetail, impossible dovetail, dovetail, long dovetail,
okay,
long
so
taper.
People don't want to see the scarf. They don't want to see the tapered scarf joint. That's cool. Now, I don't want to do
I had one vote for that.
I don't want to do the impossible dovetail because I have an entire live video devoted to that one. So if you want to see that,
Why
look up.
did you make it an option?
Well, I wasn't thinking it would be the option. I don't think people would want to see that one again, because I have an entire video dedicated to that one. So I'm going to send people over to that. But for right now, let's actually then do these dovetails, which is a fun one. So yeah, if you want to see this, just look up Wood by Wright Impossible Dovetail. And, well, it's a relatively simple one, because it's just, well, it's a sliding dovetail. Just cut it at 45. So just, it's simple. Let me grab some boards, then we can do this one. Let's do this one and this one. See how close these are to square.
Okay, you're going to have to switch your thing, though, because we can't see what you're...
Yeah, I'm just checking these before we go on. I want to make sure that my board ends are good and square, and this one is not. So let's clean them up. Now, one of the ways that you can clean them up is to put them on a shooting board. But in this case, I'm going to flip this around. It's driving me bonkers. Why can't this other camera work? Let's try it again. Still nothing.
You had two sets of different color lines.
I have 5 cameras in the shop. You think I'd get
I
them
have
all
a
to work?
question if you...
What's that?
Oh, where'd it go? Digimer asked, what's your take of CA glue?
Good stuff. I actually did a glue test a while ago, and several of the CN Arclights did really well. I mean, like, phenomenally well. So, yes, it is good stuff. It has its good places. So rather than using a shooting board, sometimes I like to just do this. And rather than going all the way across the board and breaking out the fibers, I'm just going to go halfway. And then we'll grab my square, which disappeared again. And we'll see. That's what I'm looking for that way. And so now this is basically tapered. So I'm low on this end and high on this end. So rather than going all the way through, I'm just going to come in here from the middle. And the nice thing about doing it this way is it makes it feel like you're going to take off a lot. But if you take off too much, and if you never take the blade all the way to the opposite side of the board, then you're never going to round it off. It's always going to be a slight valley in the middle, but not enough that it would be an issue. So let's see what we got. There, and there, and there. And just like that, nice square end on this, nice square end on that. Let us make our dovetails. Now, let's see. The first thing we need to know is how deep do we want our dovetails. Usually what I want them to be is about the same width as the board. So if the board is 4 inches, I want the dovetails to be 4 inches. But anywhere in there, there's no massive hard and fast rule. I wouldn't say make them any less than half the width of the board. So if the board is 4 inches, don't make them any smaller than 2 inches, if that makes sense. So in this case, I'm just going to make a size, and we're going to make them this long right here. And so that is my depth cut. If I wanted to, I could come in and lay them out with a bevel gauge and set something very specific on here and do 4:1, 3:1. It really doesn't matter as long as they are fatter on one end than the other, well, fatter on the outside end than the inside. And that way there is a mechanical advantage so that they don't pull apart. That's the only thing that's really important there. So I'm just going to set this in here. Move this over here so you can see a little bit better.
What did I... Oh, maybe it's not me.
What?
I can't... I hit a button and now I can't reply in the chat.
Why?
I don't know.
You want me to see?
I don't know. I was trying to see if I could just refresh it, but then I was afraid I'd make it all disappear and wouldn't get it back.
Oh, here, let me do this then. Come down here and refresh this page, and then you can pop out this chat when it comes back out.
Can I close this other one?
Yeah. Okay, then let's cut these down. So I'm going to grab my tenon saw rather than a dovetail saw. And the reason I'm going to grab my tenon saw is, number one, it is a rip cut, so it's designed to cut with the grain. And number two, it's deep enough to go all the way down to that depth cut. My dovetail saw is not deep enough to go all the way down. So even though I'm cutting dovetails, this is not the appropriate saw for it. So let's grab this one. And we are just going to eyeball this, set it something around that length, square across, make sure that my mirror image here gives a nice square shape. And cut down to depth. Now let's make a second tail. Down to depth. Let's make another tail. Down to depth, and then the last cut. Any questions yet?
Let's see. The poor man asks, where would you suggest someone to go for a very instructional video for building a number 4 plane?
There are a lot of how-to videos on making a wooden plane. I have a couple of them. What's his name? I'll remember it in a little bit. There's a channel. He's an older guy. I'm guessing he's in his 70s. And he has a ton of videos on making wooden planes. And that's going to bug me. I can't remember what his name is. If you're new to the channel, I am horrible with names. Oop, wrong ballot. So now we need to chop these out. It's going to feel a lot like a regular dovetail. Let me move this in. Oop. This way, there we go. And so I'm going to set this on about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch away from the line. Now, if I was really being careful and wanting to make sure I do everything just right, I get out a hold fast and lock this all down in place. But in this case, I'm just going to chop it out, cut down, and then pare out. And then we're going to cut down again. Let me zoom in a little bit and show you what I'm doing with the paring out. So what I would normally do is grab a hold fast and lock this in place so it doesn't move around. But for something small like this, I'm just going to let the bevel do the cut and pare out. Now we're down probably about halfway through this piece. Now I'm going to go right into that knife line, or maybe a little ways away from it. Keep the chisel perfectly vertical. Don't let it skew. And no, I don't really check it being perfectly vertical. I just gotten to a point where I can feel what vertical is. And if it undercuts just a little bit, that's okay. No one's going to see the middle. And it's not a structurally difficult point. Okay, now here's an interesting point. We drew the line on this side, but we need to get this line around to the other side here. So I'm going to set this on here, and I'm going to transfer this line all the way around. So I'm going to put a little nick here, put a little nick here, and then I'm going to grab this square, put that nick in there. Now we can draw the line on this side and know that it's right across. Now if I want to check it, I can roll up onto this side, and we can check that the line is all the way across here. And there, yep, right on. So there's my line on that side. So now we need to do the same thing on this side, chop it in. We're going to stay away from the line just a little bit. One quick tap. Over here, one quick tap. And then we're going to chop it out. So pull the chisel back a little ways, let it angle a little bit. And that will remove the material in between. And then we can again go in, chop out, and there's our block. Next thing we need to do is go right into that marking gauge line. And if my wood is hard or dense, I'm going to want to sneak up on that line a little bit more. But this is a really nice, easy wood. This is Filipino mahogany. And it is a very, very comfortable wood to work with. There's that one. Now we need to cut out these tabs here on the outside. So for that, we're going to put it in the vise and lock it down. So any questions while I'm moving this around?
Yeah, let's see. Alex Reavis asked, okay, so I have a question. What's the difference between a Stanley combination plane and a Craftsman combination plane?
Honestly, not that much. The Craftsman plane is modeled after the Stanley, and actually I think at one point the Craftsman planes were actually made by Stanley. And in all practical purposes, there isn't that much to them. Whoop, focus. There we go, we get some focusing. Now I gotta zoom in and focus again. There, exit. Okay, now let's cut this down. So I'm gonna grab my dovetail saw this time because I'm actually gonna cut down here. So if you're looking for one or the other, if you can find a Craftsman one at a good price, go ahead and get it. They work just as well. I mean, yes, you'll have some people who are very picky about one or the other. But as to functionality, there's not much difference between them. Okay, chop down, and then just want to get the chisel in here and clean out any little wisps that are stuck down in there, because the saw can't get into a tight corner. And while this is open here, and I have this tooth sticking out, I'm going to grab a file here. I'm just going to clean off any wispy pieces that are on here. Make that nice and clean. Then we're going to rotate it over and do the same thing on this side. Draw that last line I need. Cut down here and go in. What other questions we have?
Hollinger asked, since the long grain to long grain glue joint is strong, could you do an elongated box joint and have it work well?
Yeah, definitely. It's just with hand tools, box joints are often more difficult than dovetails, and dovetails also give you the mechanical advantage of just being wider on one side so that they actually stick in better.
And you owe Caleb Smith a dad joke. Thank you,
Caleb. Oh, Caleb, thank you. Let me clean this out, and I will go and get a dad joke from the book. The other thing I want to do is make sure that inside, I take my square here, and I put that on there, and I want to make sure that I'm flush all the way across. Nothing is sticking up in the middle, and that I'm square. The shoulder here is nice and square all the way across. I just have a little bit of junk here in the middle. I'm going to clean out with a chisel. There we go. And now, just going to smooth these out a little bit, get rid of any fuzzies. And now we're ready to put our lines onto the next board. So now we can get that onto there. But first let me look at the dad joke. Grab a dad joke book here. Yes. Okay. I got a job in a coffee shop. I feel like I can espresso myself there. But don't make two mocha... Don't make a... Oh, but don't make a mockery of me. It's a little latte for that. That was a bad one. I should probably read that one beforehand. What did the tree do when the bank was closed?
What?
It started its own branch.
It was better than the one just before it.
Yeah, that was better than the one before it. Okay, so we need to... Wait, did I square this one out? It is a hair off, but not bad. We can work with that. So what we want to do is transfer these lines from one to the other. Now, if I was going to be using a marking gauge to set the depth here, then I could use the same marking gauge to set the same depth on this one. But because I didn't use a marking gauge, well, we're just going to mark it out. So I'm going to set this on here, line everything up. I'm going to be looking down on this, making sure my corners are on there, and holding this down in place. And then we'll take the marking knife in here, tuck it back into the corner, and mark them out. Any questions while I'm doing this?
Where'd it go? Moonwolf asked, what are scarf joints used most in woodworking? Where are scarf joints? I'm sorry, I read it wrong.
Scarf joints are when you need a board to be longer, which usually means you can't find a board long enough for what you need. So probably the biggest place I've seen them used are on big table stretchers. But even then, that's really, really rare. So in most woodworking joints, there aren't a lot of places. You will find them occasionally in trim work in houses for the long trim boards, but even those are pretty rare. So we've laid out all this, and you're not going to be able to see that because this wood, it has to be really, really dark for you to be able to see it. I'll set this in here, and those lines that I drew on there, I want to transfer them square across the top because the most important thing on this is that they are square. Now, one of the fun things about doing them this way is you're not actually making any pins. You're just making two sets of tails. So it feels really, really weird at this point because you're going to be cutting tails again. And if you've done dovetails before, that it just feels wrong. So check yourself and make sure you're thinking right. The other thing I want to do is I want to mark out what is going to be disappearing. So I put X's on what is going to be going away. So I make sure I cut on the right side of the line. Because it's usually about halfway through one of the cuts I realized, oh wait, I need to cut on the other side of the line. And then we're going to repeat it. So set this in here. And when cutting, I'm going to be pinching the board. Let me zoom in a little bit and let you see this a little better. Zoom in. Man, I wish I had a cameraman who stuck around for this. So I'm going to be pinching the board on the back here. And what I found is my thumbnail is going to then ride on the saw. And so as I pinch it, if I pinch more, it pushes my thumb that way. If I pinch less, it lets it come back this way. And that lets me micro adjust until I start the nick there, and I get the nick running all the way across. So I now have a little groove for it to run in. And then once I have that little groove, then I'm going to tip the saw to match the line. And once it's been established, then we can go to town. Until we get down to our depth stop. Making very careful to follow that line dead on. Start it. And then go to town. What else we got, babe?
Judith Katz asked, did you use a knife line for ease of demo since it will not show up when done?
Do I use a knife line for ease of demo?
I don't know if it's to show where you're going. I don't know.
No, I used the knife line so I know where to cut.
I don't know.
If you're referring to using a knife line as opposed to a pencil, I almost never use a pencil. The only reason I would use a pencil is if I don't care about exactly where the line is, or I want it to show up on video, so I would use a pencil for that. Yeah, if you ever watch Paul Soller's videos, that's the reason he uses a pencil, is he'll make the line with a knife, and then he'll pencil it in so that everyone can see it. Because knife lines just don't show up in video. That line's wandering a little bit. Had a hair of a gap on that one. Oh well. Okay. Now, we need to do the same thing again with transferring that line all the way around. So I'm going to put this on here. Put a slight nick in here. Then transfer that line there and there. Now we need to chop these out just like we did before. We're going to stay away from the line a little ways. Am I still in shot? No, I need to come down just a little. Not that far. Ooh, now I'm making people sick. Sorry about that. What questions we got?
Airyn asks, what's your thoughts on Stanley's Bailey series chisels?
They're socket chisels, and I'm not a huge fan of socket chisels, but as chisels go, they're pretty decent. And I'm actually talking with a guy right now about possibly doing a chisel test and lining up a bunch of chisels and doing the torture test with them and seeing how they all perform. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. And again, we're just chopping in and then paring out. Get rid of those chips. Stay away from the line as long as possible. Chop in, pare out. What else we got?
So Mimi asks, what's the brand of files? All the big box stores ones are horrible.
That's a good way to start a massive argument. Honestly, I do not espouse to good files, bad files. Most of mine I buy at antique sales, and I'll get like a bucket of 50, 60 of them, and I'll pull 2 or 3 out of there. Yeah, I'm not the best person to ask for that, because I put up with junky files because I put up with junky files. And if you don't take care of them, even good files turn into junky files the first time you use them. So, yeah. And I just haven't had the money to spend in it, because decent files are incredibly expensive. And, yeah. Now, like cabinet rasps, I would like to get a good set of those, but I haven't yet. So that is on my list to actually experiment with and see. So, yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask that one. Sorry. Because most of mine are 50, 60-year-old unnamed files that I've been collecting over the years from bucket loads at different sales. So, yeah. What else we got?
So Judith clarified her knife line question. She meant the cross mark at the bottom of the tails.
That is a knife line that you cut down too. I don't know what you're asking about that then.
It's not the ones you made so that you knew which ones to cut out?
No.
I don't know that.
Yeah, if you're talking about this line down here at the bottom, that is the depth of how far down you need to cut. So that's just one of the points you need to know. Feel free to clarify again. I'm sorry, I'm missing something.
So now
which is normal.
You've opened the can of worms, and Blue Kestral now wants to know why you don't like pocket chisels.
They never feel right to me, and you always have to be careful of them with the blade coming out. Tang chisels just have a better connection feel to me, and I don't get the argument of, oh, you can change the handles, because I never have a desire to change the handle. I just want a handle. So I have found them to be an added pain with no benefit. But a lot of people out there like them, and everyone's different, so nothing's wrong or right, just different. So now we're going right into that marking gauge line. And then we can see, how do these work? Right, no, I got to clean these up a little bit still. So there's that. Now we want to see how square they are. So I can put this in here and come right down into this and see, does the beam touch all the way across? Yes, we're good and square there. And I need to do a little bit of file work on these, because this one, I stayed away from the line a little too far. So to clean it back, I could come in with a chisel, or I can file it out, and I find the file to be a little bit more accurate. So I'm just going back to that line that I drew. And you want to be very careful here, because this is the point at which you take too much off and you introduce gaps. What else we got?
So Judith clarified you went right across the piece rather than dash it.
Ah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's a lot of argument about that. And some people will say that you shouldn't show that line at all. But if you look at a lot of old furniture, that line shows up. And I kind of like leaving that line on there because that line says this is a handmade piece. And it just kind of speaks a little bit. So I like that.
Your mama has a question.
What's that?
Your mama has a question.
Ah, what's that?
She asks, when is your next collab? She loved the last one.
I would like to do another one like that sometime. I don't have any. Well, I know I have one other on the book coming up here soon. Let's see. Yay, there we go. All right, so let's see if this fits in here. And it's very rare that things fit just like that. But in this case, we might get a little lucky here, actually. It's a little tighter than I would like. And we got gappos, lots of gappos. Why do we have so many gaps? You see there's a big gap right down here at the bottom of all of them all the way across. So apparently, I'm going to look it up to the light and see where it's touching. So what I'm doing is I'm looking through all the cracks and I'm seeing if it's actually touching anywhere. I'm trying to figure out where is it touching and why are those gaps showing up. Huh. And that's really weird because I can see light through all of these slits on this side and I can see light through all the slits on this side. So something somewhere is sticking out. We have to try and figure out where. And that is actually really rare. I kind of like that because it gives me a chance to experiment and see where I need to clean things up. One of the things you can do, especially when it is tight, you'll notice that it will bruise the wood, which is really hard to see on camera. But you'll notice places where the wood has been rubbed smooth, and that lets you know you need to take off material there. Okay, I need to take it off there and there. Just see. So we're good and tight that way. And we're good and tight that way. That's weird. That is really weird.
Yeah,
so if I take it off there, I'm just going to introduce another gap.
Your line.
What's that?
You had a small gap when you drew one of your lines.
A small gap when I drew one of my lines?
Not when you first were sawing down.
Oh yeah, I cleaned that up with the file.
Oh, I don't know that.
Or I cleaned up the opposite side. Okay, I think I need to take off just a little bit of material here. Oh, I see what it is. There's just a chunk in this corner that's holding up. Let me see if there's any in this one. Just file that for good measure. Let's see what that does. And sometimes with these, that's where you just got to get in that fiddling state. Just kind of experiment. Never expect things to fit perfectly every time. Now that is just weird. Ah, okay, do need to take off a little down there. Where did I put that file? There it is. I don't know if this one will fit in there. I could do it with a chisel, but a chisel takes off a lot of material really quickly. And I just want to take off a little bit. Just like a, 1/64, a very little bit. Less than a 1/64 of an inch. There we go, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah. Right there. And there is our spliced joint. Got a little bit of a gap here in the middle. Oh, that's why I have a little bit of gap there, because this is the one I was checking it ahead of time, seeing if the end of the board was square, and it wasn't absolutely perfect. There was just a small gap there. So if I took a plain pass and flattened it out, I wouldn't have that gap. But for demonstration's sake, there's what we got. So there we go. Oh, here, let's put this in there. Make it look kind of funky. What other questions we got?
Jimmy O asks, why do you use your tail vise more than your leg vise?
Personal preference, as with a lot of questions that people ask me. I find it very comfortable to use this down here, is that, particularly with the vise I have, this is just a multi-use vise. I can use it just like I would use the leg vise. And I like working on the corner in that I can work at it from this way, or I can work at it from this way just by spinning around. If it's on a leg vise, I'm in the middle of the bench, and it makes it harder to get around because it's out here in the middle. So having it here makes it far more versatile. And also because this end vise goes all the way across the width of my bench, I can work on it on both corners. So I can work way over here, or I can work over here, and I can work all the way along it. And then this particular one then has the dog rows, so I can pinch things in it. It has a double dog row, so I can pinch things on both sides. And it's just a multi-use vise that I can use like a moccasin, I can use like a leg vise, I can use like an end vise, and it has all of these things. So why use another vise when this does everything? And as long as I get used to doing just one vise, this does them all. So yeah, I really like it. So that's why I use this almost constantly. But yeah, what else we got?
Let's see. Aubreykun asked, have you ever thought of...
I have never thought.
Trying to incorporate plastics in a project like recycled milk jugs or cutting board.
Back when I started Wood by Wright, I almost started a channel on on recycling HDPE, and I had started working on that in my brain as a hobby, and I was about to do that, and then I bought my first hand plane, and woodworking took over. So yes, I have done some experimenting with that, but I haven't yet incorporated into that. Now, one of the nice things is plastic, actually with hand tools, plastic works really well. It cuts like almost like a cherry or a walnut, and feels much like that, but there's no grain direction to it, so you can cut it in any particular way. So yes, I would like to do something like that, but I haven't found a good use or a good way of integrating it particularly. So yeah, if you think of something that would work well, let me know. What else?
Let's see. Stephen Wenzinger asked, how do you clean your wood files?
I have a file card, and it is, well, it's kind of like a wire brush, but with really, really thin bristles on it. And so, there. Actually, I bought this one at one of the wood stores in town. Rockler, there it is. And this one was, yeah. So it works really well for getting in there and cleaning them out. I know a lot of people really poo-poo using the wire brush, but it doesn't cause an issue at all. And it works really, really well, especially for getting inside. If I'm working with epoxy gums up these files really, really quickly. And with this, it just cleans it right out and it's ready to go. So it's a great tool to have on hand. And the short bristles on this work a lot better than using a regular wire brush where they're like inch and a half long. For some reason, they don't work as well as these short ones do. And so yes, I use this constantly. What's next?
Let's see. S. Ritchie asked, based on your experience, why do you think sanding has become the preferred method of smoothing, even though it's more expensive, takes longer, creates harmful dust, and is just plain boring?
It's easier. You don't have to worry about grain direction. Any monkey can sand a board. It doesn't take any thought. And that really is kind of one of the things that I don't want to say bugs me, but it's one of the things that kind of turns me off to power tools. particularly because that is a lot of how power tools work. It's all about in the setup. You set up the tool, you get it all right, and then any monkey can run the board through the table saw, as long as safety's in mind. Sanding is much that way. Is you can sand pretty much regularly without any fear of tear out. You're not going to be running into that. Yeah, if you go across the grain, you're probably going to leaving scratches that are easier to see, and there is science behind what grits do you use at what time. But in comparison to planing and card scraping, it takes a lot less thought and takes a lot less skill. Teaching someone how to sharpen a card scraper is actually a rather difficult thing. And a lot of people have problems with card scrapers, and until you actually get it up and going, it is one of those tasks that's it's very disheartening because it should be simple, but it takes a lot of skill to get to that point. And once sharpening disappeared from the workshop and power tools started to take over, well, once sharpening disappears, you can't cut an edge smooth. You have to sand it smooth. And so sanding kind of took over because it is the mindless way of doing it. And there are a lot of benefits to sanding. Sanding will actually fill the pores of the wood with dust. And that sounds like a bad thing, but it actually, if you're working with an oil-based finish, it will soak in the finish better because it will wick it into the wood because the dust is there to pull it down in farther, which is really counterintuitive, but that's the way it is. Now, if you're looking for chatoyancy and you want to see the glare difference in color of the wood, then sanding really dulls that because it clogs the pores and you get a more matte finish across it. Whereas if you plane it, you'll get a lot of that chatoyancy, which is a problem if you're working with pines and maples and you don't like that blotchy look. You'll get less blotchy look if you sand than if you plane. So there's a lot of give and take and different things that are good one way or the other. And sanding's not bad. It's just there are better ways to do it a lot of times. But sanding is mindless and easy, and any monkey can do it. So, yeah. Sorry, tirade. What else we got?
Oh, they're all count meant because Alan had left for a little bit because he had to go, and then he apparently snuck back in while at a concert with secret earplugs. So, anyways, it's one of those like Twitter things when people like post the stories as they go along. See how long he can get away with it.
What else we got?
I think I got caught up on the question.
Really? Cool. Well, I mean, if anyone has any last-minute questions, feel free to throw in there. Also, if anyone has any particular topic, I know Alan has been asking me to make a dovetail plane, and I'm thinking about doing a series, because I can't do that all in one night, but I might be able to do a dovetail plane in 2 or 3 nights, depending upon what we get. And that might be actually a really good way of doing a molding plane, because a dovetail plane is a molding plane. It's just rather than being curved, it's angled. So, yeah, we'll see if that comes through. If there's anything else particular.
And your mom's saying that your brother sands everything.
Yeah. And sanding will generally give you a smoother surface because it clogs the pores and you can't feel the surface of the wood as well. Whereas planing a surface gives you a more tactile finish. Like on the tote that I was just creating today, here's an early look at this one with the zebra wood. So this will be a couple videos coming out here soon. I scraped and filed and cut the handle to shape, but then I sanded it afterwards because I was going to be putting a shellac finish on it. And the BLO will soak in better with the sanding, and then the shellac it's an additive to the surface, so it's going to give you a much smoother surface on there. So having the sanding smoothing it out a little bit more than the cut surface will adds to it, so you can get a smoother, more shiny surface that the shellac will give you, almost like a French polished look. So yeah, there are benefits one way or the other. What else?
Let's see. Oh, hang on. La 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 la. You asked for a couple of questions, so they always rise to the challenge.
Alan Smith, Japanese chisels.
Matt Ezell and both Alan want Japanese. Well, Matt wants to know your thoughts, and Alan concurs.
A lot of people really put a lot of high stock in Japanese chisels, but in the end, they're still just a steel angled blade. They will cut just as well. It is kind of nice that you have that scooped out back, so they're easier to flatten. But how often do you actually flatten a chisel? I flattened my chisels once when I got them, and I chipped one of them once, and so I flattened it again. But I almost never flattened my chisels, so it's not a huge benefit to me. But a lot of people really like them, and so it's a personal thing. If a tool makes you feel good, if a tool is enjoyable to use, that is a very valuable thing. Whether or not the tool actually does the work any better one way or the other, if you're comfortable with the tool and you enjoy the tool, that's what matters. So yeah, if you like Japanese chisels, go for it. But for me, functionally, I haven't found a good reason to jump into them. Who knows what the future will hold, though. Cool. Unless we have anything else?
Sorry, I was trying. There were two, I think they're quick questions.
Okay.
Kevin Lerma asked, have you done any videos on complex molding plane sharpening?
Yes. Actually, I just put out a video a month ago, I think, or so, doing molding planes. So if you look up Wood by Wright, how to sharpen molding plane, it's in there. Also, I have several videos on doing the complex sharpeners on Stanley 45 and 55s. So I have a couple of videos on that as well.
And then Airyn asked, have you ever tried making a Japanese rising sun dovetail?
Yes, I have a live video on that as well.
I was going to say,
we did that one almost a year ago.
Was this a year ago now?
Yeah. It's up there on my shelf somewhere. But yeah, those are fun. That was a hard one to get into a single live because they take a lot of time, and if you rush them, they end up being pretty poor. But if you take your time and you do them right, they can come out really nice. So yeah, definitely take a look at that. And if anyone ever has a question, if I did a video, all you have to do is search on YouTube for Wood by Wright, whatever your topic is. So Wood by Wright, Rising Sun, or a Rising Dovetail, or whatever you want to call it. You'll probably come across it. So yeah, cool.
Okay, we have two more quick, and it's only 8:59 and we started late, so I'm going to give it to him. So let's see. Aubreykun asks, what sort of vise do you recommend for small work?
Usually the vise that your wife doesn't know about.
You have no small vices.
A vice is a really personal question because as long as it holds the work, it's what you need to do. And small work, a lot of people are going to be thinking about different things. One thing that I do is I get a hand screw, a wooden hand screw, and I clamp this in the vise, and I will work on little things up in here. So working on the totes and knobs and things like that, small pieces. A hand screw, number one, it gets them up a little bit higher so they're a little easier with files and rasps. And number two, it's just easier to hold little things in the corners of the jaw. So that's usually what I'll do is I'll take one of these and I'll clamp one side in the vise, and then I can open and close this to work on the little pieces. So yeah, these are useful. What else?
And then J. King Kingsbury asked, where did you get your chisels, or where do you get your chisels? I'm going to be doing a video here soon on actually doing a comparison on different types of chisels. Because this is the most common question of what's the best chisel to get. I get that question more than anything else. And in all honesty, it really doesn't matter. A lot of people get really, really picky about which chisels, and it really doesn't matter. And so my go-to chisels, the ones I have on my rack, this set are Harbor Freight wooden handled chisels. They work really well. Yeah, they won't hold an edge quite as long, but they're functional, they work well, and they're dirt cheap. My main set, the ones I use every day in and out, and I've had them for over 4 years, these are from Aldi. They're the grocery store. They're $7, dirt cheap. They're not the best on the market, but they hold an edge fairly well, and they work. That's all you need. So those are my go-to chisels. And the reason I use these rather than getting an expensive chisel is, number one, I don't want to spend the money on something when I have something that works. And number two, I like being able to tell people, you don't have to spend the money. They're decent chisels. You can buy cheap ones and they work well. The big thing I tell people is find something that's comfortable in your hand
If you're going to spend money on chisels, find one that has a really comfortable handle. That is the most important part of the chisel. This steel part in the end, the functioning part, is less important than the handle. Find a handle you like and are comfortable, and that's the one you should spend your money on. And if you don't want to spend that much money, go to Aldi. And the sale on these should be coming up soon. They sell these at Aldi once a year, yeah, we'll see when they come out. Otherwise, the set from Harbor Freight, for the money, they're great. Cool.
So they want you to end on a dad joke.
You want me to end on a dad joke? Okay, I'll pull one more out of that box. Let's see. Oh, a guy goes into a butcher shop, and he bets the butcher $50 that he can't reach the meat on the top shelf. The butcher says, "No way, I ain't taking that bet. Those steaks, they're too high."
And don't anyone say that that's what I say all the time. Just waiting for Alan to chime in there.
Yes. So I think that'll about do it, and I'm not sure what my video will be on next week. Maybe we'll starting on the dovetail plane. Maybe we'll be doing something different, or we might just be doing a regular Q&A. I think it's almost time to do that again. So we'll see how that goes. If you have any thoughts or ideas, let me know. And I think that's about it. Anything I'm missing? Cool. Well, we'll round it up. Until next time, have a wonderful day.
Oh, hang on. I gotta get the button.
We're looking for the button. We're finding this is a game we play each week.